Connecticut's 2 U.S. senators. That's because the ad, which was meant as an attack ad on Marco Rubio, plays on the massacre at Sandy Hook.
Marco Rubio looks good on TV, but that's about it. Ted Cruz for president. Ted Cruz walks tall for what we believe. Standing up, often standing alone. Ted Cruz makes things happen. After Sandy Hook, Ted Cruz stopped Obama's push for new gun control laws.
In response, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut wrote, "The new Ted Cruz ad makes me want to throw up." And I'm pretty sure that's a feeling shared by many who lived through the horror of Sandy Hook. Middle of the road, common sense voters won't be impressed by a campaign whose opening pitch to voters is portraying the candidate as the one senator who took on the parents of Sandy Hook in the wake of the most horrific mass shooting in our lifetime. We're lucky to have Senator Richard Blumenthal tonight. He had tweeted today, "I'm astonished and appalled. Blocking gun violence prevention legislation right after the Newtown tragedy is no basis to brag." I'm joined by now by one of those senators, Richard Blumenthal, and also by David Horn, Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones and an MSNBC political analyst. Senator, thank you. Just give us the full picture of Sandy Hook, the legacy of that tragedy in your state especially, and why this ad is offensive.
Why this ad is so offensive is it shows a basic lack of humanity. I was there when those families learned that their 6 beautiful children and 20 children and 6th grade educators would not be coming home that night. And I was there when the president came to comfort them. And what this ad reflects is a lack of humanity and compassion that is really offensive and insulting, demeaning, and disrespectful to those families. And it shows also, I think, a lack of leadership. The President of the United States is a leader. And I call on Senator Cruz to disavow this ad. It isn't his ad, it's his PAC's ad. He can disavow it and denounce it. And that's what I think he should do, because I think that in the interests of really restoring basic credibility and trust, he should do that.
Well, even though the Cruz campaign is legally, you might say technically, barred from coordinating with the super PAC, Cruz has expressed similar sentiments to the ad in the past.
Following the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, President Obama and Harry Reid led an assault, not on going after violent criminals, which is what they should have done, but instead going after the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. And I led the fight to protect the Second Amendment in the U.S. Senate, and we defeated President Obama's efforts to undermine our rights.
Well, there you have it, basically a mirror image of what's in the PAC ad. Anyway, in 2013, Senator Cruz accused President Obama of using the massacre up there to advance his own political agenda.
I think he had a political agenda, which was to restrict the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms of law-abiding citizens. They took advantage of that horrible, tragic shooting to push that agenda, and they didn't focus actually on solving the problem.
I never understood how somebody would say gun safety is a political objective. It's a policy objective.
Right.
It doesn't score you any points. It's a very divisive issue. You do it because you believe in it.
And, but Ted Cruz has made this a prominent political issue in his campaign for months now. Back in April, I wrote the story. His own campaign, not a super PAC, was putting out a fundraising email saying that he was much better on gun control than Rand Paul or Marco Rubio.
I mean, much better against it.
On gun rights. Why? Because he stood up after Newtown. He has said this again and again. I called one of his and they said, yeah, he's much better. After Newtown, Marco Rubio and Rand Paul did virtually nothing. So this has been a talking point that he's developed to get the gun rights vote, the real excessive gun rights vote, over Rand Paul and Marco Rubio. The two people are in the Senate lane competing against him.
You know, Senator, I know you don't want to get into going after a colleague personally, but Senator Blumenthal, this fits to me the image I've gotten of Ted Cruz. I mean, he calls his party leader, Mitch McConnell, a liar. He seems to be always dumping on the Senate itself, bringing it to a halt, shutting down the government, using unbelievable language. Sometimes I think he thinks that President Obama is Fidel Castro. He speaks about his political opponents as the enemy in the worst sense.
We can disagree about policy, and we can take different positions on issues of great contention. But this kind of ad reflects a lack of humanity that I think is abhorrent to many of us, and that's why I think he can still disavow the ad since it is from his super PAC, but profoundly and unmistakably to play on the Newtown families, I think, is a disservice to him. And many of my colleagues, I think, will share that point of view, because I'll tell you something, Chris, no matter which way my colleagues voted on that common sense package of measures, remember it was background checks, a ban on straw purchases and illegal trafficking, they all felt deeply, and they met with those families and felt the horror and unspeakable, unimaginable tragedy of a parent learning at the end of the day that his child was not coming home that night. So I think it will resonate in a very bad way.
Usually people are, they treat victims and their families as, off base politically. They leave them alone. Anyway, thank you, Senator Richard Blumenthal.